What's going on today, Internet? Selfish here with Retrospect. Today we're going to take a look at a whole lot of handhelds to make a buyer's guide for you. In front of me is about a tenth of what we reviewed this year. And so I'm going to include some real quick snippets of a lot of my favorite handhelds or a lot of the best value handhelds throughout the year. And then I'll have links to my Thingamabob to reviews I did of these handhelds so that you can get more information if it's something that interests you. I partnered with my friends over at MechDIY to make this possible and to make it easier for you to procure some of these devices. So we'll talk more about that as the video goes on. Let's take a look. I just want to start by saying that there's going to be a lot of handhelds that are reviewed this year that I really do like that just aren't going to make this video. Doesn't mean that they don't deserve to be in this video, but for the sake of time, I chose handhelds that have a lot of community support, are typically easy to get, and tend to show the best value or price to performance proposition. But that can also be weighed up by software. But anyways, I think you guys are going to understand what I'm doing here as we get rolling, but I hope that you guys enjoy this. I'm having a lot of fun putting it together. We're going to clean this off and start off with some smaller handhelds. And everything's not going to be categorized by size or anything like that. Kind of be where I feel like it might fit in as far as for a user, whether it be more pocketable or something like that. I want to start off with the GKD Pixel though, and this might seem like a really odd choice, but this was a kind of a handheld that just kind of floated for a while, and it didn't get enough traction initially, and then once it became scarce because they stopped making it, now everybody wants it. So this bad boy kind of became a collector. Now this is the smallest handheld that I reviewed this year. Surprisingly, actually, I didn't do any of those little funky pocket ones or anything like that this year. GKD Pixel is a premium handheld. Port size, it is on the higher price market, but it kind of earned it. It's got an all-metal design, and when I say all-metal, I mean buttons, everything are metal on this handheld. And so it is a premium handheld. It has some interesting, unique features like the light bars on the outside and things like that. Also has custom firmware, which you kind of need because the firmware on here is a little tricky to navigate. So I have actually gone back and used the original firmware because I kind of like it. It took me a while to get used to it because you have 3 different ways to play the same game. But once you figure it out and you go in, you're like, oh yeah, that's right, that's not the right one. I'll move on to the next one. Not a big deal. But the GameKiddy Pixel, or the GKD Pixel, is definitely one for any collector, but also for anybody that just wants an ultra pocketable handheld that'll play, some decent PS1 and stuff like that. Nothing crazy, but a lot of times when you're going for something this big, it's mostly for those 5 or 10 minute breaks you have while you're waiting in line or something like that. Hard to get better for pocketability than this when it comes to a device that'll do what this one will do. Next, we're going to talk about a couple TrimUI devices because TrimUI has come of its own this year, and neither of these actually came out this year, but both of these I did some work on this year. Both have custom firmware. Both work really well on their custom firmware. They were almost designed with like that etch or that itch to like put custom firmware on. If you get a newer Model S like this one, there's a Powkiddy Model S as well. I can't remember the model number. If I remember, I'll put it up on the screen. But there is a Powkiddy version of this as well. Every time I see them, they both cost the same. But the newer version, especially the Powkiddy version, you need to go way back in firmware beyond what this actually came with in order to put custom firmware on it. There's nothing with any of the newer firmware packages available for it right now. But I didn't do a ton with this. I just did some screwing around with firmware and stuff like that. But the Smart is still to this day one of the most comfortable and responsive little tiny handhelds that's out there. This thing is just, it's unbelievable how well this thing works. And custom firmware definitely helped, but it emulates very well for what it is. And it's so smooth. It slides in and out of pretty much any crevice, pocket, anything like that. And so this has been a really fun handheld to have. And before a couple of the next ones that I'm going to show you came out, this was definitely the smaller handheld or mini or micro, I guess, where these ones fit handheld to have at the time. You get the Model S as the size of about 3 credit cards stacked together, and then you have the Smart. This also was designed by Miyoo. So the Miyoo team actually worked with TrimUI to design this particular handheld, and it shows. Next, we're going to discuss the Miyoo V4. The Miyoo Mini has been one of the most popular handhelds in this space for a very, very long time, and once you play with one and hold it, it's not hard to tell why. Now, one thing about the Mini versus the Plus is you do have these flatter buttons. They do make better back buttons, which one of mine has on there, and it definitely makes for a better experience because it raises some of the buttons so you don't feel like you're hitting the wrong button all the time. But the V4 has been the answer for Miyoo because for a little over a year, Miyoo was having a very hard time supplying this handheld because they were having a hard time sourcing the screens. And the V4 is the answer to that screen issue. These tend to always be in stock now, which is great. It has that same love that the Miyoo has had since it came out, and this just happens to be the newest version of it. And now that they fixed the screen issue, these things are fantastic. And there's so many accessories and things you can get for them. And with Onion OS custom firmware on here, it's arguably the best custom firmware you can get on any handheld. And you really can't go wrong with the Miyoo Mini V4. It's a great handheld. Next, we're going to talk about one of the I don't know, maybe halfway through the XX line of handhelds from Anbernic this year is the 28XX. This is their mini handheld in a horizontal form factor, which is really nice for those of us who grew up playing horizontal form factor handhelds or controllers. This does have a lot going for it. This is rocking that H700 SoC. You're going to hear a lot about that today because it's in a lot of Anbernic handhelds. 7, I believe, maybe 8 now. Handhelds, you can count them at the end of this video if you want to, because we'll probably have all of them in here. Well, maybe we'll cut her back. We'll see. But this has been a very solid handheld for a lot of people. There's lots of different custom firmware options, again, because it uses that same SoC that its bigger brothers use. The custom firmware is here for it. Now, for me, this isn't my favorite handheld that came out this year. I have spent a lot of time with it. There's one thing that really bothers me, though, because I like to put these in my pocket, and I went through this in my review of this handheld as well, but it sounds like you're walking around with a half-filled container of Tic Tacs in your pocket, because for some reason these shoulder buttons are loosey-goosey from the factory. Now, there are some kind of home remedies to fix these. Also, the D-pad is so small on here, you can play pretty well with it, but it is a little small for me, and the lack of Wi-Fi. I'm a big retro achievement guy, so without Wi-Fi, that would be the only reason why you would need Wi-Fi on here, so it really doesn't need Wi-Fi, but for me and retro achievements, kind of a bummer when I was carrying this around every day that I didn't have the ability to get on my retro achievements. But overall, extremely solid handheld. A lot of people are in love with this thing, and I can see why. I love using it. I just have those couple little things that can be fixed and remedied in some other handhelds, so it kind of pulled me away from using this every day. I do go back to it from time to time, though. It is really fun because you really just hold it like this and you're good to go. And so sometimes this is the one that I'll grab. I don't know if it's because I'm feeling like rocking an orange handheld or what, but I really love this creamsicle handheld color. I've made custom handhelds in a very similar color scheme, so this one always appeals to me. As long as I'm going to be in a place that doesn't have Wi-Fi, so I won't get my retro achievements anyways, then this one's a go for sure. Alright, next we're going to talk about the Miyoo A30. This one had a very, very rough start when it came out, and oddly enough, this came out the same day as the last handheld we looked at, which is the Anbernic RG28XX. The Miyoo A30 came out that exact same day, and to much fanfare. Now, obviously, this is a little bit unique. This has full-size buttons on it, which is really nice, something Miyoo actually went out of their way to make sure you had full-size buttons, and they included this inset joystick, which some people probably will tell you they'll never use it, but if you ever see them playing on one of these, they use it. Especially if you play any kind of racing games or anything like that, you will find yourself actually using this joystick, and it is a pleasure to use, even though it has kind of a short throw. Just the fact that it's there makes a huge difference. Now, I've obviously done some work on mine, and I wanted it to match Spruce OS 3.0 when it came out, and that came out a couple of weeks ago. And like I had said before, Onion OS is probably arguably the best firmware made for as far as a custom firmware for Linux handhelds. With Spruce 3.0, this is Onion, maybe even better than Onion. We still gotta give it a little bit more time. It's only been out for a couple of weeks, but it's already doing things that Onion didn't do. And they even included in the 3.0 version the game switcher that Onion is so known for, where you literally just hit a button and it'll pop up the last few games that you played, and you can switch between them and start right back in the same spot you're at when you exit it. Absolutely phenomenal feature. I don't know why nobody's done that in any of these other firmwares for the Anbernics or anything like that, but Miyoo holds that in all their handhelds right now, and it is a really cool thing to have on here, and I quite enjoy it. And this handheld I do carry around quite a bit. It does have Wi-Fi. Typically the places I have appointments have Wi-Fi available, and I can use this on their Wi-Fi and rack up my achievements. So this is a good handheld. I really like it. This is kind of a neat little case some guy made for me, and I had him etch Miyoo on here with the logo. He did a really good job. If you go watch the video where I did the customization on this, there's links to all the custom parts I put on here down in that thingamabob on that particular video. So that's the Miyoo A30. This is a definite recommend for me for sure. Now, Anbernic's answer to the Miyoo Mini with its popularity was the Anbernic RG35xxX, and that's what this handheld is. This is a beautiful handheld. It works really well. This has a custom firmware called Garlic OS, very similar to Onion OS. I don't know why they choose these vegetables for names, and odd ones at that, but it does have a good operating system in Garlic OS. It has good buttons, has a good D-pad, though you do sometimes, including mine personal one here, have to do a tape mod in order to make the D-pad not get cross diagonals when you're moving it, but once you do that, very good D-pad on here. Buttons feel good. Really, it's a good device. A lot of people really like it. If you're going to get one of these, I would stick with the original RG35XX because then you can do the Garlic firmware. They did come out with a 2024 version or a plus sign version of this one, which doesn't have the ability to use the custom Garlic firmware on it, which is a real bummer. The biggest downfall of this handheld, and I think what prevented this from maybe overtaking the Miyoo Mini Plus, which we will talk about here shortly, is the fact that this does not have Wi-Fi in it. It's a real bummer, but they did all this great stuff, and then one of the things that prevented it from getting even more market share. Now, on these with Wi-Fi, you could also do game scraping to get all your game cover art and everything like that. This is missing the ability to do it right from the handheld, so it's just an ease of use kind of thing. But this is really fun to play on, so I mean, I don't have any complaints about it. This has softer buttons too, which is really kind of cool. They're like almost a rubbery finish. Really like that. If you're just getting into this hobby and you can find an original 35XX and throw garlic on it, this is a really good place to start until you get into retro achievements, and then you'll probably get yourself a Miyoo Mini Plus. This here is one of, I think, 6 Miyoo Mini Pluses that I have. So all the same stuff as the Miyoo Mini, same internals, things like that. This does have a different screen. Obviously, it's bigger. This is a 3.5-inch screen. So it is bigger than the original Miyoo Mini, and then this does add Wi-Fi, so that's pretty cool. Now, I've done a lot of mods on this, including putting a Sony speaker in here and some other things. It's been a fun handheld for me, but this one has been a daily carry for me, or was a daily carry for me, for the better part of the last year and a half or so. I've always had this thing with me. So now she's retired for the most part. But if you're just getting this hobby, or if you've been in it a while, you know that you need a Miyoo Mini Plus in your life at some point in time. And people will tell you that have made the switch or, you know, gotten one, is they never really understood why everybody liked it. So, and I was one of those people where I was like talking smack because I was like it can't be that great. You know, I'll stick to my Anbernic or whatever. And then you get it and you're floored, especially with Onion OS on here. Again, it works so well. It's so intuitive. It's a good complement to this handheld. This one also has a higher build quality. Now the V4, that one's going to be better than the original Miyoo Minis were, but this is better yet. And then you do have a tighter battery door on these than the Miyoo Minis do, so you don't have to worry about your battery door popping off or anything crazy like that. So this has been Handheld of the Year, just like the Miyoo Mini has been Handheld of the Year. Also, the Miyoo Mini Plus has made Handheld of the Year. And I would say until just recently, this possibly could have made Handheld of the Year again, but we do have a new contender, and we will talk about that when we get to it. But there is a new kid in town as far as that goes, and that's what I'm carrying now instead of this. And so we'll talk more about that as we get there. This is another Anbernic RG35xx, but this one is the plus spelled with a P, not the plus sign, but spelled with the P. This here is the 35XX that I showed you earlier, but this one here has the 8700 SoC. Anbernic put in all their XX devices this year. Great handheld, great SoC. Very powerful for what it is. This here has good access, and it has internet. You can FTP into it if you want to. You can do retro achievements, but you can't get Garlic OS. And it's a real bummer because Garlic was going to come out on this right when this handheld came out. And in my initial review, I said I wouldn't recommend this based off of thinking that Garlic's going to come out, just based off of you don't want to buy something on hopes and dreams. But at the time, Black Seraph, who makes Garlic OS, was working on a Garlic OS 2.0 build that I believe he's still working on. It's been out about a year now, and it never got that update. But as you can tell, I gave it a fair shake. I just liked the Miyoo Mini more. This is heavier. I don't like how these buttons are set up on the back. They tend to get hooked on my pocket. There's just a few things that I just didn't like as much as the Miyoo Mini. But obviously I started customizing it, so I was definitely giving it a fair shake. It just wasn't my favorite handheld. Now, people who are into Anbernic and who made the switch from the original 35XX and wanted to go to the Plus, even without Garlic OS, they will, for the most part, do nothing but praise this handheld, and I can see why. I mean, it is a really good handheld. It's just not exactly what I was looking for, and so I went back to the Miyoo Mini Plus. But those that use this swear by it. I was really looking for a horizontal handheld, and Anbernic answered my prayers, and I'll show you shortly. But in this same line of handhelds, they did come out with a horizontal version of this, which is one of my favorite handhelds. We'll get into that here shortly, but this is a good handheld, especially for anybody that came up from the original 35XX that is willing to sacrifice Garlic, but wants to get that Wi-Fi and have a lot more power. This is a good way for them to go. Now this here is the TrimUI Brick, and you have to be ballsy to name your handheld Brick, especially in this market, because if it doesn't work, you will never outlive the memes. Lucky for them, they created a fantastic handheld here, so their arrogance and cockiness really paid off. I can't say really much bad about this handheld. This has become my new everyday carry, or EDC handheld. I just did a video on this recently, and you'll find that link down in the thingamabob. But this particular handheld is more powerful than the Miyoo Mini, but has a lot of the same characteristics and that feel. And now there is a custom firmware for its big brother, which is the TrimUI Smart Pro, that is coming over to this because this uses the same SoC as the TrimUI Smart Pro. So they actually share a chipset like some of these others we've discussed have done, but this is sharing the chipset to a much bigger device, and it wears it very well for a very small handheld. It's not often I want to play Dreamcast and things like that, but this does give you that ability, which you can in some of the other firmwares for some of the other handhelds we talked about. But this one in particular, I just hit this little function button here, and while I'm playing, and this goes from a D-pad to a joystick, and then back again, or at least it acts as a joystick. And so I don't have to tap the power button or anything goofy. I can do it while I'm playing and be able to use them both. I haven't found another one that's that fluent. Not that I do it a lot, but if I want to do it, it is very, very fluent. This has a 3.2-inch screen. It's got a crazy resolution, and it just looks, it feels, it is just, it's great. I haven't plugged this in since yesterday. It's at 56%. I play this a lot today. You know, with the holidays and everything else, I spent a lot of downtime. If anybody's got family, I'm sure you understand. And this thing is just doing very well. As far as battery life goes, performance goes, I haven't had really any glitches on it yet. Now, I do have another one coming, so we can check that one out too. So there will be another video for this coming fairly soon with another one of these. Not necessarily a comparison or side by side, but to make sure that we don't have a fluke here, because this thing is my favorite handheld to come out this year, pretty much, I think, because it fits right in and out of your pocket. It's customizable right off the bat. You don't even need to open it, and they send you extra buttons. You can make it feel the way you want. No more going out and purchasing other back buttons and stuff like that. It's a really good, well-rounded handheld. It feels premium. It looks like a miniature version of the Analog Pocket. The Analog Pocket is a good handheld. It's one of the best, people will tell you. But this here, if I were to look for a premium handheld, and this thing isn't that expensive, and it is a premium handheld. I have premium handhelds that do less than this that cost far more, and this is priced so well. It fits within the pricing of all these other handhelds I've shown you, and the build quality is something that these other companies are going to have to take notice to, because I think TrimUI, until they do and up their build quality, TrimUI is going to start edging out some of these companies. Can't go wrong here. This is fantastic. Powkiddy busted in with a couple of sleeper hits this year, and the V10 is literally one of those hits. I didn't expect it was going to play as well as it did, and now I have multiples of these just because I think it's great. I think it's super comfortable. It looks a little awkward at first, but once you hold it, you realize it's like perfect. This also is completely designed to play Game Boy Advance. Now, you can emulate any systems you want on it, but the screen is optimized for Game Boy Advance, and it plays it at a 2x resolution from the original Game Boy Advance. So without doing any upscaling, you're already at 2 times the native resolution just from the handheld itself, and they're inexpensive. And so something definitely to look at, especially if you're into Game Boy Advance. It has some quirky keys on it as far as, you know, changing the volume and screen brightness and stuff like that. But as more custom firmware comes out, that'll all get fixed. For a really low cost handheld, it's hard to go wrong with the V10. It's just a fantastic handheld. Powkiddy surprised us with yet another handheld in this area or this space this year, and that's this. This is the RGB10X. You know, because it has an X on the back. This handheld here plays very well, and it's extremely, for how bricky it seems, it is actually comfortable to use. They use a very soft finish plastic, which is really nice on here. Buttons, D-pad, everything feel really good on here. They did include a joystick. You know, not the world's greatest joystick. It is a Switch-style joystick, but it does the trick. It does what it needs to do. And I know I'm going to piss some people off when I say this, but I think that if people actually wanted to compare the two, would give the popular budget handheld, the R36S, it would give it a run for its money. I think that this is the new budget king when it comes to emulation handhelds. This thing is just fun to play, and it's not a vertical handheld. It's horizontal, so they don't have to be competing against each other. But for price to performance, you really can't go wrong with the RGB10X. Biggest downfall is it doesn't have Wi-Fi built in, but you get yourself an OTG adapter and a Wi-Fi dongle, and you can have Wi-Fi just like that, and it still works, just like any other handheld that came with Wi-Fi on it. So I've got a dongle already pre-set up for this one. I don't know what else to say about it. It's a great handheld. Now here's another fun one. This is the RGB20 Pro, which oddly is named not at all like any of the other RGB20s. So the naming scheme of this makes no sense to me. But the handheld is crazy cool, and it works really well. And another unique thing about this handheld, this has the exact same screen as that TrimUI Brick that I showed you before. So with the TrimUI Brick screen in here, this one actually launched first, so maybe the TrimUI Brick has this screen in there. I'm not exactly sure which was the chicken and which was the egg when it came to production. But this is a really fun handheld, and a lot of Powkiddys don't have Wi-Fi. And for some reason, they built this cool little door down here so you knew that it had Wi-Fi. Also, this has a really weird looking little face. It is pretty cool. I really like this handheld. It's comfortable to use. Surprisingly comfortable to use. It is kind of weird that it is so tall, but this holds like a cell phone that actually has your back buttons as well as joysticks on it. So the way when you're holding it and playing on it, it feels like you're playing on a bigger cell phone, but you're actually just playing on a handheld where you would have all your buttons and things if you needed them on a phone. So it's great. It actually works really well. I'm surprised that nobody has done anything like this before. It's very unique, and it's nice to see unique things. It's nice to see somebody coming up with something new in this space, because new does not happen near often enough. Everything's pretty much a copy of a copy most of the time. One person has a good idea and everybody copies it. I wouldn't be surprised if we start to see copies of this handheld come out from other manufacturers, just because it is a very comfortable and yet pocketable design with the way they designed it. The sticks and the D-pad are actually lined up as well as the face buttons, so there isn't anything protruding really anything further than each other. So pretty cool. And the back is flat enough where it can fit in and out of your pocket without getting kind of hung up. But it is bigger, and when you compare it to a phone, now you know it'll fit in your pocket. It just looks awkward because it's a handheld that we haven't seen before. But again, I think somebody else is probably going to take this design and run with it. And we're probably going to see something like this that maybe even is more advanced, but we'll find out. It's a cool handheld. It works well. I don't really have much bad to say about it. The only thing that I would be concerned about, and I said this in my review, would be if you have pets, possibly getting hair underneath this clear plastic that's on here on the front. Now, the warning was that these were coming with hairline fractures within this plastic on here. Mine doesn't have any of those, so I'm not exactly sure where that came from, but not an issue that I've run into, so really cool. And they were smart. They put the speaker on the front, right in the middle. This is an old Anbernic trick from the 353V, so really cool to see that happening here too. Really good handheld, really fun. I've played with this one a lot. I haven't had any issues with it. ArcOS is actually coming out with an official build for it. One weird thing was that if you order this, you may get ArcOS on it. You might get Rocknix because Powkiddy doesn't have an official OS for this, but ArcOS is right on the brink of launching an official version of ArcOS specifically for this. And so once that happens, a little update and everything will work exactly how it's supposed to. But honestly, right now, there's a few little twerky issues because it's not necessarily optimized correctly, but it works pretty well in most instances right now. You do run into some issues in some of your higher end emulation systems. I think that they're not recognizing the screen correctly, but that should be fixed once we have an official OS build. So something to look at if you are interested in something just different. This is a conversation starter, no doubt. There are a lot of other great handhelds that fit within this category, or this kind of, I don't know, it's not really a category, but kind of within this family of handhelds. You got things like the V90. This has been out for a couple of years. It keeps getting software revisions. It's running on a new version of Miyoo software right now. Works very well on the new version. The old version still works very well as well. Very fun handheld. Very inexpensive. There's a lot of stuff like that is available in this, so we can't touch on everything like I said before, but that should give you a good base anyways for kind of some of these more introductory into the space as we continue to move forward here. Alright, we are going to take a quick intermission for you, so this is a good spot just to pause the video, and I'll wait for you. No, seriously, if you hit the pause button, I'll wait. Or I can keep talking if you want, but I think that if you need to go to the bathroom, maybe refill your beverage, this would be a good time to do it. Did you pause? Perfect. Welcome back. Yeah, hopefully you took a little breather there. So I just want to give a shout out to my friends over at MechDIY here real quick. They have been a huge support this year in being able to make the content that I make for you. Oh, look, there's a cord there. They've been a big supporter of the channel this year, and so I wanted to partner with them for this video. So the things that I am showcasing here are my favorite things, and I will have links down in my thingamabob of where to pick them up, and you're going to find these devices over at MechDIY. They have a big selection of devices, great customer service. I've never had any issues with them or had any of my viewers complain about anything they've gotten from them, and anytime you purchase from them, because it is an affiliate, that's what helps support the channel. So I know I don't do memberships or anything like that, and people are always like asking me, how do we support this going forward? And the best way I can say is go through my affiliates. MechDIY is an affiliate I work with all the time, and so it won't cost you anything additional to use my affiliate links, but that is how we do fund the channel. Also, MechDIY gives me a very healthy discount. If you use discount code RETROSPECT16 at checkout, you can save yourself a bunch of money. So it's a win-win for everybody, and I just want to say thank you, MechDIY, for all the support that we got for the channel this year from you. So, awesome. Moving right along. The next handheld that we're going to look at is one of my favorites. It is the RG35xxH. Earlier I talked about the 35XX Plus. This here's the horizontal version. This came out right after the Plus. This has been one of my favorite handhelds of the year. I have multiples of these as well to match my outfits or my mood, maybe just match my mood. But this, I mean, this, if you can see, I've got like the secure mods, you know, PlayStation stuff. I've got the Cloud 6 buttons, done a couple other mods on here. We're running Hall Effect sticks. I mean, this is a really fun handheld. But without doing all the fun, quirky stuff that I did, still a very, very solid device. This is running the H700 that most of the Anbernics this year have been running, and it has been a fantastic device. I can't say enough about it. I was trying to come up with that's a negative. Like, I always have positive and negatives, and I think the only negative I've come up with is I don't have every color of this yet, but I probably will at some point in time. This has been a fun handheld. I've done a mod video on it. Maybe we'll do another mod video on another one. We'll see what happens. Maybe if I pick up another colorway or something like that, we'll do something else. This is the RG35xxH. Great handheld. This next handheld has been a huge success, probably Anbernic's #1 selling handheld this year. I'm not sure for sure, but we have seen some of the numbers from Anbernic just because there were some concerns about this at one point in time. They have done some updates to it since then as well, just there's no separation between the battery and the CPU. Never been an issue before. A lot of these manufacturers do it that way. Some people were concerned. Now Anbernic has put in some fish paper, separate the two. This one does not have that. Still never had a problem with it, but this is the 35xxSP. This here is pretty much the same as the last handheld that I showed you, but in an SP format, so as a Game Boy Advance, essentially SP. It is bigger than the original GBA SP, but it is a great handheld, and the original GBA SP doesn't play things like Dreamcast, and this right here can do it. So you get some Dreamcast, you get some N64. It has really cool overlays in it, so when you're in a game, it actually has these cool overlays where it actually makes it look like the Game Boy Advance SP, and you can play with this with colors and things like that if you want to, like some of the SPs had on especially some of the secondary screens. But it does give you the correct aspect ratio, and it really just gives you that nostalgia. There is a nostalgia feel to this handheld that you're just not going to get anywhere else. Also, don't have to worry about scratching it. It will go into standby with certain firmware when you close it and then reactivate when you open it, which is really awesome. So you're going to save on battery that way too. And this is what I keep in my EDC bag. This one's always just in there when I'm in a pinch or whatever. I mean, I just always have it because I don't have to worry about scratching it or anything like that. Again, I just close it, I throw it in my bag. It actually has its own little pocket, but I don't have to worry about anything bad happening to it. And it is just an all-around really fun handheld, and as far as I know, this is likely the top-selling handheld from Anbernic last year because the nostalgia that it brings pretty much to everybody. So this thing, if you haven't played with one, you'll probably fall in love with it the second that you do. It's really well put together. Button placement's really good. D-pad works well. Very, very nice. And again, I'm running some like Cloud 6 buttons on here. Just a little customization for myself because I tend to do that with the handhelds that I use quite often. So really cool device. And that brings me into the RG353V. This one I've had for now a couple of years. This was actually one of the first handhelds I ever, prior to actually making videos and things like that, this was kind of what got me into the itch, but I did do a review on a new one of these this year. They have new custom firmware for this handheld. They've made tons of different stuff. I like to run Arc OS on it, but I have this little charging port thing. We can take that out, but I have a charging dock, so I've got a little magnetic charging port on the bottom here. I've got, again, the Cloud Life 6 buttons. I've got better back buttons on here. I mean, you could tell this thing has been used and abused. These actually aren't the thumb caps that I normally use, but I had to steal the ones that I normally use for another handheld, and so I just put these nubbins on here, and I wouldn't use them as this tall. Maybe use some shorter ones. They could get in your way, but that's not the handheld's fault. That's my own stupidity. Again, I've done a lot with this, but this is running the Rockchip RK3566 in it, so you do get really good emulation performance on this handheld, and really this is what gave me the bug, this handheld here. They're still making it. I don't see it going away anytime soon. So this is one of the handhelds of 2024 that I have recommended more than once, and I'm going to recommend it again here. If you're just getting into this game and you want to start here, everything else is playing makeup to get to this handheld, just because it is, for what you get, it is an affordable handheld. This will be in Anbernic's Hall of Fame by the time it's all said and done as far as their overall Lifetime Achievement Awards. I'm not really sure if that's true, but for me, and I know a couple other people, even my friends in my personal life, use this handheld, and everybody seems to love it. So definitely worth taking a look at this. Now, one handheld that we cannot discount is the TrimUI Smart Pro. This is one of my favorite handhelds from the last year. I did an initial review on this before it was really anybody knew what it was, and the only bad thing I really had to say about it, other than the fact that it doesn't have clicky sticks, was the price at the time. The price then has since dropped in about half, and this fits in with the pricing with all these Anbernic XX devices. with a much better build quality. This is a premium handheld at a very affordable price. It is solid. There has been a couple of different firmware builds for this, from Tomato OS to my favorite CrossMix OS, and I have beta tested them throughout their time coming in. Now, there is a beta now for Newly, which you can run on some of the Anbernic devices as well, and I will probably give that a test, but CrossMix is kind of the end for me, I think, because CrossMix 1 is going to be on the smaller version of this, the TrimUI Brick that I showed you, so they will match and it'll make net play and things like that easier. But also, they've done a really good job of optimizing the different emulators on here to get the most bang for your buck as far as performance out of the different systems. So I have been nothing but impressed with the TrimUI Smart Pro since it launched, and it's only gotten better ever since. Now, again, I always complain about the clicky buttons because these are some really weird joysticks, and you do find yourself using them on this handheld, especially when you're playing stuff like PSP. If you went with a clicky joystick, this wouldn't be as pocketable, because right now, this slides right in and out of your pocket without any issue. But if you had a clicky joystick, it would be taller and it would prevent that from happening. So my assumption would be that that's why they sacrificed the clicky joysticks for that. Other than that, though, everything else on here is a quality build, and you aren't going to find a whole lot of handhelds that have the quality that the TrimUI Smart Pro has, especially not at this price point. So this is one handheld that I definitely, if you're looking for a horizontal handheld with a nice size screen, this is the route to go, especially in an affordability factor and running a good custom OS like CrossMix. And you can purchase these with CrossMix already pre-installed, so if you're not comfortable with updating your operating system, it's not a problem. You can get these with CrossMix already installed on them, and then after that, you can do the updates through the updater right on the handheld itself. If you've been into retro handhelds for a while and you don't have a TrimUI Smart Pro, it's probably because you've never held it. If you're just getting into retro handhelds, this could easily be that handheld that you buy and maybe not upgrade for a while, because this will do everything you want it to do. So again, these two handhelds have the exact same SoC inside of them and will play the same games. Now, with the TrimUI Brick, you do not have joysticks, though you can sort of make your D-pad into a joystick, and what I did was set my function key to turn my D-pad into a joystick. Doesn't work as well, but having a function key that close versus when you try to do this on some of the other handhelds where you have to use the power button, much more seamless experience, and so it is not the worst case scenario for those times when you would want to do that. Both are very good handhelds. The TrimUI Smart Pro, I think, set the standard for what you can get in a premium handheld, and once the price had dropped to where it is now, it's really opened up some avenues where other companies really need to up their game in order to get into the same class as the TrimUI Smart Pro. And then with them following up with the Brick, that is also setting a new standard for smaller vertical handhelds and getting those companies to hopefully step up their game to try to match this kind of price to performance. So really good combination of the two. But the TrimUI Smart Pro, we can't not have it on this list. This is one of my handhelds of the year this year, absolutely hands down. You're not going to get a much better recommendation than that from me. Then I want to take a look at something else in that series of H700 SoCs from Anbernic or XX devices from this year. This is a really comfortable handheld. It really is designed and built like a premium handheld for Anbernic. Even though it is very affordable, it fits right in this line. All the handhelds in the XX line are typically within about $10 of each other. You're really getting a good deal here. We do have our inline bumpers, but we do have triggers on here. Now, these are micro switch triggers, so you don't get that analog trigger feel, but you know what? It doesn't matter on this handheld. They feel really good. This does awesome emulation. I do like to play some Dreamcast on here and some of my PlayStation titles, whether it be PS1 or PSP. You can deal with the aspect ratioing on this, at least for me, with a 4-inch screen. It's not so bad. We do have light up sticks on here too. It is thinner than a lot of the other ones, which is kind of neat. It's even thinner than the 35xxH, and it just kind of has everything that you would want in a handheld like this. It works real well, and it's comfortable, and it does slide in and out of your pocket. I know it seems weird because it is a bigger handheld compared to some of the other ones we've looked at here, but this one here, because of the way that they did the back, you've got guards for those triggers, and so she just slides right in and out. They don't really get hooked on anything. At least in my personal experience, I haven't had any issues. I would say that this might be a better one than the 35xxH, even though I really love the 35xxH. The build quality on this might be just a little bit better. I know some people think it's actually too thin. I think it's about right. I mean, they had to make it so you could fit it in your pocket comfortably and still put this beautiful 4-inch screen on here. So to me, this is definitely a winner for sure. I would take a look at this one if you are looking for a 4-inch handheld. I know, like me, my eyes are starting to get old as I get older, and so this one's a little easier to game on. So definitely something worth taking a look at. Next, we're going to take a look at the vertical version of the one we just looked at. This is the 40xxV. This is a really comfortable handheld for a vertical handheld. They did a good job with button placement on this. We do have a single joystick. This does have the cardinal snapping on it. I believe it's an intentional thing, but nobody listens to me. It really makes it feel more arcade. So if you want to play some arcade games, this stick is perfect for it. Now, if you're trying to do something more precise, cardinal snapping could be an issue. You can put a Hall effect stick in here, or there is some fixes out there in the custom firmware that actually eliminate that, because it is a firmware thing that causes that, not the stick itself. So there have been some fixes implemented, I believe in Newly, which I am running on this, as well as the horizontal version of this handheld. But they did a good job, I think, with where the grooves are here, with where your fingers sit. It's a real comfortable handheld. I use this a lot. I had never played a Pokemon game before, and I decided this was going to be the handheld I was going to try it on. And I've got about 16 hours into a Pokemon game on here. So this one's been getting a lot of use. And one thing about me is I try to come up with a game for every handheld that I want to use on a regular basis. It also forces me to look for new ways to make them better, as far as different custom firmware or different applications, things like that. So this is one that I decided I was going to play Pokemon on because I really liked the feel of it. And so I thought it'd be a good, just a good comfort, and it really is. For some reason, does kind of give me a DMG vibe, even though it's not really one of the ones that should give you that vibe. We have some other ones we'll look at that definitely should give you that vibe a little bit more than this does, but definitely feels like it's more Game Boy-esque than some of the other ones that we've taken a look at. Next, we're going to take a look at one of my favorites from this year, and it is the RG Arc. Another one we're going to take a look at here is the RG Arc. This is a Sega-inspired handheld. You can see it by the 6-button layout, as well as the D-pad we have here that is on a pivot. This thing is so much fun. If you want to get a little Sega nostalgia, I think they did a really good job bringing a lot of that feel to this. Unfortunately, it doesn't emulate Sega Saturn very well, which I think tends to be what people gravitate towards with this, but it does everything else on Sega extremely well. And I have had so much fun playing fighting games and some of my old Sega classics that I grew up playing on my Sega Game Gear. I've been playing on this handheld since it came out. And I think I mostly just love it because of the nostalgia, but it's really comfortable. It has this teardrop design kind of thing doesn't look real ergonomic. It kind of looks like a weapon Batman would use, but when you hold on to it, it actually has these little grooves here, and it feels I don't know, you have to hold it to really appreciate it. We obviously have shoulders, but on our triggers here, they are more of a membrane trigger. So they're not clicky, and everything feels real smooth on this bad boy. If you want to get into the Sega feels, there are a couple handhelds from 2024 that have finally started to begin focusing on that, because everything seems to have been Nintendo focused prior to that. Now we're starting to get some Sega inspired stuff. This is the first one that came out, and this is a lot of fun. Definitely a recommend from me, especially if you were a Sega kid growing up like I was. This will bring back some memories. All right, now we're going to get into some of my favorite square body handhelds. And where would we be if we didn't start off with the RGB30? This is kind of what kicked it off for everybody as far as the square handhelds went, and the fad took off. I think it's more than a fad now because we're getting more and more of them, and we're finding more and more things to do with them. So that is really cool. They're really good for Game Boy, Game Boy Advance, stuff like that as well. Neo Geo Pocket also square, but these are 4-inch square handhelds, and there are a handful of them. Some are really good, some aren't. We're going to take a look at the really good ones here in this buyer's guide, because they wouldn't fit well in a buyer's guide if I was pointing you in the wrong direction. So we will take a look at a couple of them. But this has been a really fun handheld. I have spent a lot of time modifying this myself as well. I've added vibrate to it on top of everything you can see here. And so this is a good handheld. It's very reliable, except for that we have seen some battery issues with it. I've never had a problem with the battery itself, but charging can be a bear on Powkiddy devices, and this one is no different. For some reason, Powkiddy can use the same SoC as another company and still can't figure out how to get their chargers to work. And in this one in particular, I've had difficulty charging it, but once you find the charger that works, it'll always work. So just make sure you keep that charger around. You really can't go wrong if you're looking for a square handheld for Pico 8 or some of those, like I said, other systems that look really well on here, like your Game Boys, Game Boy Colors, your Neo Geo Pockets, things like that. This here is a fun handheld, pretty bland on the back, and it is very square to hold on to, so a lot of people do use a grip with it, so that is always a possibility. I have never used a grip with it, but I'm not saying it's a bad idea. I just never got around to using a grip with it. It's funny that I put PlayStation stuff on here. This is not exactly any of the Sony stuff. Really doesn't aspect out very well on a square handheld, but I don't know. I was in a mood that day, I guess, when I went to get all this stuff. So this is just a really fun handheld to have. If you're into square handhelds, and if you're a collector, you definitely probably already have this, or if you don't, you will at some point in time. But definitely something worth taking a look at. Now we'll take a look at the RGB20SX. Like I said before, the RGB20 line doesn't make sense to me because none of them are actually like in line with each other. I guess this is still a vertical handheld, but this is also a square design, so this has more or less the same screen as that RGB30, but this is in a vertical design. This handheld I've played a lot of hours with. I like to do a lot of arcade games and things like that on here that are in vertical form. I play a lot of pinball on this as well, just because it's like, it kind of feels like a pinball machine where you want to tilt it when you're playing games and stuff like that. You still don't get away from the smiley face you do see on some of the RGB20 devices, and there it is. Once again, it just sneaks right in there. This does have your normal Nintendo Switch style sticks on it. They are inset a little bit, and oddly enough, depending on how deep your pockets are, this fits decently in your pocket. The only thing that really trips it up is the way that this lines up here on the back. It leaves a couple of millimeters here between this bumper and the shoulder buttons on the back, and you can get hooked a little bit. But other than that, for such a tall handheld, which is kind of part of the fun and why I do a lot of vertical arcade games on here, but for such a tall handheld, you can fit it in some surprising places. That's what she said. But yes, for such a tall handheld, you can put it in some interesting places. You do have front volume. This also, with the square screen, works really well with Pico 8. You'll hear me say Pico 8 a million times on my channel because I love it. It's like the $15 for life for buying games for a game console that never existed. And the virtual game console through Pico 8 is so much fun. It does sound like they might be coming out with a handheld of their own now, because Pico 8, I think, after the RGB30, the handheld we looked at before this, Pico 8 probably quadrupled in user base after that handheld came out, because there really wasn't anything focused on this one-by-one design before the RGB30. And now with all the handhelds that are focused on that, you can get over there and play on Pico 8. Games like Celeste started on Pico 8. So there are some bangers that come out of there for sure. And it's just fun to see what people are creating. But this handheld here is great for that, and really great for arcade, especially vertical arcade games. Definitely one worth taking a look at, and it's really comfortable in your hands because it is so tall. The only thing that's awkward about this is trying to use the joysticks if you are holding it like it's meant to be held, because they are in a spot. So it's not hard to use them, but over time you may get a little thumb cramping depending on how long your thumbs are, because it is kind of a backward travel. But other than that, no complaints. This one charges just fine. This is one of the few Powkiddy handhelds I have that charges without any quirks or any issues. So you got that going for you. And you have video out, so if you want to use this as a console, hook this up, do a couple controllers, play with your friends. For me, I'd have to make some friends, but play with your friends once you make them. And so you can get some more versatility out of this handheld. So really good handheld. Again, this one's running the RK3566, pretty much same internals as the RGB30, just in a way more fun form factor. And a lot of companies try to copy this handheld this year, and none were successful. So great job on this one, and definitely worth taking a look at. Technically, this is not a square handheld, but it is really fun for playing square handheld games still, because you're really not losing any real estate, maybe a little bit, but you do get your bezels and your overlays and all that kind of fun, happy stuff. But with your bezels, kind of melts into it anyways. But if you're looking for a horizontal handheld that's surprisingly comfortable for something that is so darn square. But one thing that Powkiddy did was actually added ergonomics to this. I can't think of another handheld that Powkiddy's done ergonomics like this on before or since, and it is very comfortable to use. This is the RGB10Max3. I'm actually running a test version of Gamma OS on here, so on mine I'm running Android, but you do have some really good builds out there from Rocknix and what have not. Definitely some custom firmware options for it. Really fun handheld to play, and then when you want to get into your more widescreen stuff like your PSPs and stuff like that, still a good handheld for that as well. So this one kind of is a mishmash with the way that it's set up, so it works really good with your square aspect ratio games, and it works really good with the horizontal games. If you're not really into the vertical handheld thing, this might be a good option as far as being able to get the Pico 8, Neo Geo Pocket. Those systems look really good on. This is a good option for that, just in design. Next up, I want to talk about the RG CubeXX. This, I think, is the square aspect ratio, 4-inch, 1x1 handheld that I was waiting for all year long, as I tested multiples, and I'm only showing you the good ones here. But this one here really brought it home for me. I have not stopped using this thing. I love it. So this has pretty much become my go-to for most of my square aspect ratio type stuff. But I'm, again, huge Pico fan, and so this has become my little Pico machine. But it's too powerful just to play Pico on, so I have been playing some of my other handheld systems on it as well. This does have your RGB around your thumbsticks if you're into that. These are Joy-Con style sticks. This D-pad works surprisingly well. I think Anbernic's really kind of coming around, and they've kind of figured out this round style D-pad. But one thing that's really cool on this handheld is they did a good job with ergonomics on the back. Now, this is like the little brother to the RGB Cube, being that it's Linux versus Android, and we'll take a look at the Cube as well. But this is a solid handheld. Very, very comfortable to play. I haven't had this one real long, so the others have definitely gotten more playtime, but this one will quickly catch up, or has been quickly catching up since I got it. They did this cool texture thing with your shoulder buttons, which actually feels really nice. It's like a little grippy texture. Everything just lines up. Anbernic did a really good job, as you can see where like my hands sit on here, lining everything up to where you'd use it. Now, I'm a firm believer that if you're playing a system that came with sticks, the sticks should be on top. But because this is Linux, we are limited to the systems that we're playing. So I think that they did a good job by putting the D-pad on top on this particular handheld, and we're not losing a whole lot there. This is one, if you want to get into the 1:1 ratio, this would be the way to go, I think, right now. This one just dropped recently, and the price is really good on it. The performance is good. This is running that H700 SoC that we've been talking about in this video, so this is a really, really good handheld. I was waiting for them to come out with this. After the Cube came out, we were all kind of hoping that there's going to be a Linux version because we couldn't figure out 1:1 doesn't really make as much sense in Android. Though I have found lots of use cases to have it in Android, it did make more sense to have it in Linux, and so we do have a Linux version here. And this is just, this is a beautiful handheld, and it's extremely comfortable. So if you're getting into the 1:1 or you want to get into it, I'd say this is a good jumping off point. It does price out right around the same as the RGB30 anyways, so this here I'd say is a higher build quality handheld than that one. They're both good, but this one's definitely a better build quality handheld and something that's going to last you a while. So if you want to get into it, this is the way to go. Now, sticking with that square theme as we move into Android, this here is the RG Cube. This came out a couple months before the handheld we just looked at, and this one right here has been used and abused. I play with this thing all of the time. I oddly like to emulate GameCube on this, even though it's not the right aspect ratio, so don't kill me, but I feel like a Cube should be playing Cube games. One disadvantage with going on Android, which this has, is that you can't really run Pico 8 natively because there is no Android version of Pico 8. It is Linux, Windows, everything but Android based. There's a native way to run it, but there's not a native way to run it through an Android device. Now, you can emulate it through Fake 8 if you like to do that through RetroArch, but there is no pure emulation. There is also a new Pico program on the App Store, and I can't remember the name of it, but if you look up Pico 8, it'll come up. I am personally not a fan because it randomizes and just gives me games to play. I have a very good Pico 8 library that I have collected. And again, once you pay that $15, you're in for life. So over time, you can download carts. So I've been collecting for years, and so I've got the games that I want to play. And unfortunately, it just gives me random stuff. But that's nor here nor there. This handheld, again, this is the one that they came out with the ergonomic buttons, but this has active cooling on top of everything else, and the ability to bump up your horsepower as you're playing in Android. So if you want to emulate some more hard to play stuff, again, not a great handheld for playing PlayStation stuff, but I do love the PlayStation button design, so I decided to go that route. And a lot of times, if you're into emulation or if you're just getting into it, you'll know that a lot of times the buttons don't really matter because depending on what system you're playing, they're in the wrong order anyways, even though you can go in and remap them. Sometimes it's just easier just to leave them. And this is running the Unisoc T820 SoC, very powerful SoC. It's a pretty powerful SoC for handhelds like this, and you can do some light Switch emulation on here. Like I said before, I like to play GameCube on here. You can do your N64, Dreamcast, and then move your way back down, PSP, PS1 type stuff as well. This will do some Sega Saturn as well, so really light Nintendo Switch, like I said, but you can get some other stuff. Now, unlike the other one, this one does actually give you some travel here on your triggers, which is really nice, especially if you're going to play, depending on what you're going to play, I guess I should say. And then this has a different pattern on the bumpers and the triggers for the texture. I actually prefer the one on the RGB CubeXX, but this one's not bad. All right, now that we're into Android, there's a few that we need to go over here, and the first one's going to be the Retroid Pocket 2S. This handheld, there is not a better price performance handheld on the market today, I don't think, than the Retroid Pocket 2S. This bad boy here is comfortable to use. Oddly, it is still kind of that flat feel as far as how you hold in your hands. I find it relatively comfortable. They do make grips for it as well. I've never had a problem with it, but you can emulate GameCube and all kinds of stuff like that on here. This is using a Unisoc chip, and it is powerful enough to even play some very light Switch games. We're talking some indies and things like that, or text-based, probably some RPGs. I don't use it for that, don't buy it for Switch, but you can do that. But until recently, I was playing all my GameCube games on this handheld with very little issue getting things to perform the way that I wanted them to. So you, again, aren't going to get a better better price to performance handheld than this one on the market today, especially for an Android device. So if you're in the market for an Android device and you're just getting into this might be the route to go. Even if you've been into it for a while, anybody who has this will tell you that this is a top performer. For some reason, as a reviewer, sometimes we don't talk about this enough or demonstrate it enough, but it's definitely worth taking a look at. The next one I want to talk about here is the RG505. The price has come down significantly here over the last year and made this an extremely affordable handheld. This is running a Unisoc T618 SoC, and it is powerful enough, again, to play some Nintendo Switch games, but that is not the focus of this handheld. I almost exclusively use this handheld for playing PSP, which works great on here. I am rocking Gamma OS, which is a custom Android build that's on this handheld. Technically, it's a Lineage OS, but that opens up a lot more possibilities with the handheld and uses less memory by eliminating some of the Google systems that are on there that are always running in your background. So you can really squeeze some performance out of this Unisoc T618. It is worth every penny if you pick it up. It is a little heavy for a handheld, but it also has a big, beautiful screen and comes with all the bells and whistles you would expect it to. I'm not sure why it didn't pick up as much steam as its little brother, the RG405M. Granted, that one is made out of metal, so possibly that would have been it. That's probably the reason. I just said it out loud. But this handheld here, to me personally, I prefer over the 405M. Not nearly as pocketable because it is a bigger handheld, also very square, but it has these nice grips that actually aren't supposed to be grips. They're just supposed to make it not slide off of a table, but I really do like how they feel because it's right where the knuckles of my middle fingers sit when I'm playing on the device. I've never gotten fatigued playing on here before, so if you're looking for something that's kind of outkicking its coverage now, the price has come down on it. This is a solid, reliable handheld that has a whole lot of community support behind it, and it's just not talked about nearly enough. So the Anbernic RG505 is definitely a winner in my book. I would say the biggest downfalls are going to be the weight of it, also the lack of ergonomics that are on here. Kind of a bummer. I do have a project plan to customize this entire handheld once I figure out what I did with all the stuff for it, because I've had it for probably 6 months and I have no idea where I put all the parts that I ordered for it, but we will have another video coming out with the 505, especially now that the price has come down. So if you don't already, subscribe to the channel and you will see a video hopefully soon, literally as soon as I find the parts for it, so we can make this thing even more fun than it already is. Now we're going to take a look at Anbernic's first T820 device. It's a Unisoc T820 device. This is the RG556. This is kind of the step up from the 505. This handheld actually has an OLED display. I use this more for streaming than anything else. It is running Android, so streaming is really easy to do on it. Some people really hate the feel of the plastic on here. You will see a lot of complaints about that online. I've never touched a black one, but I'll tell you what, the blue plastic on here does not bother me at all. It does kind of seem like a cheesy, cheap plastic because there's no texture to it, which I think is the big complaint about it, because that does make it seem cheaper. In reality, to not have texture actually would make it a more premium plastic, but that's nor here nor there. It is a very glassy device. It can get fingerprints. This is why I didn't get the black one, because I was concerned about the fingerprints that it would pick up. As you can see, this does pick up some prints of its own, but this is actively cooled. It is a Unisoc T820. This is their first one of the year, and it went head-to-head with a Retroid device, which I'll show you next, but this to me has been a very reliable handheld, and I've had no problems with it at all. I really do enjoy playing on this, and like I said, I do primarily use this for streaming, just because of its OLED display. So if I'm at an appointment that has Wi-Fi, a lot of times I will bring this because it will fit better than like my Logitech GCloud in my bag, and then I can continue to play my streaming games that I would otherwise be using my GCloud for at home. It is very comfortable with these ergonomics that are on here. This is one of the first attempts Anbernic ever made to put ergonomics on a handheld, and they did a very good job. This is a handheld I've never experienced fatigue on. Every button on here is very sharp and has good reaction, so I think that they did a really good job with this. Even this glossy D-pad does a pretty good job, even with your fighting games, and if you want to give it the old Contra test. So if you're looking for a bigger OLED display, but don't want to pay bigger OLED display prices, the Anbernic RG556 is definitely a good option for you. Again, one of these handhelds that I do primarily use for streaming, but it is a great all the way around performer. Does well with emulation. This is really fun, again, to play PSP on. I also do some Vita emulation on here. It's kind of in its infancy as far as the GPU is on here. You're not going to get drivers for it. That aside, though, it still does work pretty well for some Vita games. So let's take a look at the RG406V. One of my favorite handhelds of last year was the RG405V. They are very, very similar handhelds as far as looks. The 405V, still a solid handheld if you can get this on sale. This is a great handheld to get, still active cooling. This is using the Unisoc T618. Over here, we do have the 406V. This is using the Unisoc T820. A fairly significant jump in performance. As far as these handhelds go, this one is going to be more performant, but if you can find a good deal on the 405, it is not a slouch at all. This is another handheld that I used to play a lot of GameCube on. The only complaint that I have about this is these triggers on here are terribly sensitive. You could blow a kiss in the wind and it will actually hit your trigger buttons for you. I have struggled with this with playing some games because I continue to hit these buttons. And as you can see where your finger wraps around, and this comes around the corner here, and I don't know how to show that to you, but it's coming around the corner, and it becomes kind of a struggle because you're hitting the buttons. One thing they've updated here on the 406V is they've actually brought those shoulder buttons back a little bit. They've also added some tension to them, so they're a little harder to push, and it's just right. I don't have problems with hitting those buttons on accident anymore. They've also put these awesome new Hall effect joysticks in here that Anbernic will hopefully continue to use on all their devices. These are similar to the ones you would find in like the Odin, the Retroid, stuff like that. These are a very good, solid Hall effect joystick. These do still have the LEDs around them because why not? You can even swap caps with any of the Retroid devices. Now they are a little tall, and I'll tell you what, that's my biggest complaint about these joysticks on here, but I will take the performance over complaining about the height any day. Main reason why they're tall is it makes this very hard to put in your pocket. Now you'd say, why would you put a 4-inch handheld in your pocket? Well, I carry the 405V around in my pocket, so you would think that I'd want to carry the 406V around in my pocket, but these joysticks are a little tall and they will get hooked. Also, if you're throwing it in a backpack or something like that, I would recommend putting it in a case just because these will get hooked on stuff with that as well. And there are plenty of cases out there that they make for these two devices, so not a problem. And they tend to share accessories fairly well across the board. Next, we're going to take a look at the Retroid Pocket 4 Pro. I know there's already going to be comments of people saying, why don't you try the Retroid Pocket 5 with its beautiful AMOLED display, or the Retroid Pocket Mini? Well, Retroid doesn't send me handhelds like that, or they haven't sent me those handhelds. This is the one that I have to review, so this is obviously going to be the one that I talk to you about, because I'm not going to talk to you about a handheld that I've never played with. But also, the price of these has come down a little bit and built even more value. This came out at the same time as the RG556, and it is a little bit more performative than the RG556. You can still play some light Switch games, but again, don't focus on that with this handheld. It's great for N64, Dreamcast, PSP, GameCube, everything like that. This thing does a very good job with all those systems. I do have a couple gripes, like it doesn't like to hold a battery, so even if you have it off, sometimes the battery will drain, so just be aware of that. That's a problem that typically Linux handhelds have, so I'm used to it. This being an Android handheld was not really prepared for that initially, but now that I am, not a big deal. This is awkwardly pocketable as well. They did a good job of protecting the trigger buttons back here, but you actually can slide this in and out of your pocket if you want to carry something bigger in there. It's just slightly bigger than a cell phone, so it's really not taking up a whole lot of space that you normally wouldn't in one pocket anyways. It does have active cooling. The fan on this does sound like a jet engine taking off on high, but any other setting sounds good, and you really don't need to turn it up that high anyways, because this thing doesn't really get that hot. Just a word to the wise, it's very unlikely that you need to run this on high, unless you're emulating for multiple hours. Not going to be a problem, but it is kind of a cool little venti system they put in here for the active cooling. It looks really nice, and though not the top of my list, this is a solid device. Though I think you're going to get more price to performance out of the 2S. This has a far more performative chip in it, so you definitely can do a lot more with this than you would be able to do with that 2S. Really good value. Now that the price has come down a little bit, the value of this just continues to grow. You're going to find a more fun Retroid handheld than the Retroid Flip, and unfortunately they haven't come out with a Retroid Flip 2, and I'm not sure that they ever will. This does have slider style joysticks, which some people don't like. I love. I think it works just fine on here, and they are clicky, surprisingly enough, so they do work well. D-pad's pretty solid on here. Face buttons work great. There's a lot of open room here. Maybe we can make a DS. I'm just saying. You would hope that that would be where they would go, but this is rocking the T618 by Unisoc. It is a very good handheld. I just wanted to bring it up here real quick in the hopes that maybe this will get Retroid to come out with a Flip 2, because this is my favorite handheld of theirs. You don't have to worry about it getting scratched up or anything like that, because when you're done playing, you just flip her closed and throw her in your pocket. It does have a resume mode that normally works. Doesn't work all the time, but it normally works out pretty well for you. It also has active cooling. Some people modify this cooling vent. I have seen no reason to do that. I've never gotten it hot enough where it really runs at full power anyways, as far as the cooling goes. And they have added additional back buttons to this, like you'd get on a Pro controller where you have your M1 and M2 back buttons, and they are in a good position to be able to use them. This is a really fun handheld to have, and it does get people asking a lot of questions about what you're doing. So I just wanted to bring that up here quick at the end. that Retroid, you need to make a flip too. And for any viewer out here that's going to take a look at this is a fun handheld. If you don't have one in your collection, I would say that it probably is more of a collector's handheld at this point. But if you don't already have one, this is definitely worth the pickup. There's a lot of people that thought that this was a really dumb handheld when it came out. I fortunately didn't know that before I had picked it up, and I fell in love with it immediately, and a lot of people came around to it, and it is really good. Again, with that T618, you can do some light Switch performance. Not really made for that, but I do play a lot of indie Switch games on this handheld, and that's kind of where it's been reserved for a while as far as what I play on here, because as I've stated before, I try to pick certain games or systems that I'll play on a handheld to make me continue to go back to them, and that's exactly what I have going on here with the Retroid Pocket Flip. Then I thought it'd be kind of fun to show you just a couple of other handhelds, because I know that I'm still getting questions, as I stated before, of people wondering, why are you not trying out the new Retroid handhelds? And there's a couple of reasons for it. I just haven't ordered them. And also, I have like the perfect handhelds to do any of my Android emulation anyways, if I want to get above and beyond anything that I have showed you so far. I spend a lot of time on my Odin handhelds. These things are fantastic. I also have two of the original Odin Pros, which pretty much perform the same as the Retroids, so very similar in bench testing anyways, and in real world testing. So I don't really see a huge benefit of that. And then when I get beyond this and I want to just do game streaming at home, I always use my Logitech GCloud. This is what I do all my game streaming at home with, and this thing, you can't get a more comfortable handheld for cloud gaming. It's got teardrop design and things like that. So this is kind of my beast for at home when I'm going to do cloud gaming for the most part, and it is fantastic for that. So I don't, again, see a reason to sacrifice this beautiful screen in order to maybe use one of those. Now, those are OLED. That would be a big advantage, I suppose, as far as that goes. And then if there's anything that my Odins aren't going to play, I just use my Steam Deck, and this is my beast. Now, I never really have done a video on the Steam Deck because I feel like so many people do videos on the Steam Deck. If that's something you guys want to see, throw some comments down below. These are just kind of the above and beyond the buyer's guide kind of things that you can get as you get deeper into the hobby. It's not stuff that I specifically would say, go out and get these. I don't do any emulation on my Steam Deck. I don't like it. So these handhelds are a godsend to me. For one, I don't have to carry the Steam Deck around. I can put these things in my pocket for the most part. Even if I put them in my day bag, not a big deal. Not nearly as heavy as trying to carry the Steam Deck around. So I prefer to just play the handhelds when I do any kind of emulation. Also, emulation is so unnatural on these bigger devices. Even on the Odin, sometimes emulation is a little unnatural. I do a lot of emulation on those, but it just doesn't feel like it's supposed to. And I'm kind of a purist like that, but I'm not really, because I don't care about the original equipment so much, but I still want that feel that I remember from childhood. And I'm just not getting that on those bigger devices. And that's where the beauty of these handhelds come in, this hobby comes in. Yes, there's things out there that are better, and maybe we'll even do it better. You're getting more of that retro nostalgic feeling by using these handhelds. And that's just my personal opinion. So that's going to wrap things up for today's buyer's guide here. Hopefully I was able to answer some real simple questions for you. Like I said at the beginning, there's going to be detailed reviews of everything that I talked about here down on my Thingabob or within my channel. I will create a buyer's guide playlist. If you just want to go through the playlist, there will be information on there that you can go and check out any of these handhelds and the reviews that I did on throughout the year, and possibly any customizations or things like that as well, because I do love to do my modding, and that's pretty much what got me into this hobby. So take a look at those. Use the links, go over to MechDIY, use code RETROSPECT16, save some money. If you're buying this through the holiday season, they are running some great promotions anyways, above and beyond. Use whatever promotion gives you the biggest discount. But please use the link down below. Using that link to MechDIY is the way to support the channel so I can continue to bring you guys content. Any money that's made is invested directly back into the channel right now, so then we can make some more cool stuff. That's all I got for you today. Thanks for watching. Bye-bye!